Damn, I'm gonna get copyright claimed for being too good. So you may be asking yourself, Percy, why are you currently reclining on your luxurious Snorlax beanbag chair? The answer is because I am in pain. I have nerve damage in my back. Also, my carpal tunnel has been flaring up, and you can't see my feet, but my plantar fasciitis is also acting up. I'm in pain basically all day, every day. My only times of relief is when some nights I'm lying in bed, and my back is positioned just right, and my heating pad is at just the right temperature, and I do this with my arms. Hell yeah. But the reason I'm going to present as if it was an artistic decision is because I'm realizing how comforting Peter Pan is for me. Like, why did I choose to revisit my favorite childhood book during a pandemic? I think it's because Peter Pan makes me feel comfy. You know, working on this video has been very comforting for me. It's like I'm wrapping myself up in nostalgia, like a warm blanket fresh out of the dryer. And the only reason why I eventually read Peter and Wendy was because of my love for my favorite childhood movie, which is Disney's 14th animated film, Peter Pan, which premiered on February 5th, 1953. This movie was my movie, okay? Like, it was my favorite. I would never shut up about it. According to my sister, I would sometimes watch it like 4 times a day. I actually have this movie memorized. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, back when I had a 2-hour commute from work, I would actually play it to myself in my head to keep from getting bored, you know. The second star to the right shines in the night for you. Unfortunately, the VHS I had in childhood was lost, I think, in a move. But don't worry, I do have the 2-disc of a Platinum Edition. I also have the Diamond Edition. I also have the soundtrack on vinyl. And on cassette. I have a problem. To tell you that the dreams you plan really can come true. Like most Disney movies of this kind, this one is a musical, and while the songs are mostly good, they don't come from the source material and also don't have the same songs as the musical version of the stage play, because that actually wouldn't premiere until 1954. Also, something I think I forgot to mention before is that each adaptation is actually going to choose whether or not it wants to be based on the book or the play. This one is based off of the play, so was the silent film. So if I make any comparisons to the source material in this one, it'll, I guess, mostly be to the play. It's already kind of like a well-known jokey joke that Disney movies tend to be very different from the source material. I think that some are more wayward than others. Like, I know that people definitely have their gripes about certain adaptations in the 90s that were kind of obsessed with having, like, marketability, you know, having comic relief characters that didn't really fit the tone.
I'm losing to a...
This one isn't that bad. The only time they really try to go for comic relief is mostly Smee and then sometimes Captain Hook's relationship with the crocodile, but besides that, it actually does stick pretty close to the source material. Like, as we're about to see, the timeline is kind of different, but it really does stick to, like, the main story beats, like the Darlings, going to Neverland, Tiger Lily, the crocodile. Like, things might be a little bit out of order or just, like, done differently, but all the main story beats are still there. So this film, like the stage play, begins the night that Peter comes to take the Darlings away. All this has happened before, and it will all happen again. But this time it happened in London. It happened on a quiet street in Bloomsbury. It still has the stuff about, previously the shadow was discovered and it was because Nana had it. The only difference is that in this one, it's Wendy who gets the shadow from Nana, not Mrs. Darling. A lot of care was taken to create the character of Wendy in this movie. Wendy is played by Catherine Beaumont, who also played Alice in Alice in Wonderland, and she was also the character model for the animators when they were developing, like, the initial designs. Not only that, but Catherine Beaumont has been brought back, like, a couple of times to revoice Alice and Wendy, and she even makes an appearance in Kingdom Hearts. And really quickly, can we talk about the animation? Like, it's so fluid, it's so beautiful. The way that animation used to work, you know, back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the earth and this movie was being made, is you would draw each frame of movement on a clear plastic sheet, and then you would put it on top of like the pre-drawn, pre-painted background, and then take pictures from above of the person like moving around. Like, I appreciate animation so much. It just like boggles the mind how it works. Thinking about how many bazillions of hours went into making just like 1 minute of animation just boggles my mind. Like, I'm an artist, but I'm not that kind of artist, you know? Like, I just drew a perfectly good picture, and you're telling me you want me to draw it again, but slightly different? And you want me to draw hands? Ew. Like, it's just so fun watching, like, the way that Wendy is I mean, you know, everyone in the movie is animated great, but Wendy in specific, just, like, the way that her arms move so dainty, and, like, the flow of her night dress is so subtle. Like, I really love it. I think it's great. So Peter visits in the night to find his shadow, and Peter is played by Bobby Driscoll, R.I.P. In this adaptation, Bobby Driscoll really captures that, like, rascally, like, brattiness that this version of Peter is so known for. Like, I really love this adaptation's version of Peter, where he's just, like, this, like, just this myth that kind of whooshes into your life and then spirits you away. And the chemistry that Peter and Wendy have in this movie is also really great. I guess it's kind of like an opposites attract sort of situation, where, like, he, you know, is the rogue, and he always wants adventure and danger, and she's, like, more reserved and more, like, thought out. Like, I really like the way that they kind of work together in this movie. In this version, there's no thimble related things. Like, Tinkerbell falls onto some sewing material and still tries to keep Wendy from kissing Peter. So there is that same jealousy, and that's actually going to play, like, a big part of the story later on. So even though that conversation between Peter and Wendy about why they might want to go to Neverland together is different, Wendy's, you know, still wants to bring her brothers, and so then the four of them all go together. The first thing we see in Neverland is Captain Hook's ship, which actually, like, it's been really interesting rewatching this with, like, a critical adult eye. Because I never, as a kid, I never really appreciated how smoothly this next little segment goes to not only, like, fit within, like, the tone of the film, but also to kind of move the things along. In our first scene with Hook, they do still have, like, the expository dialogue about, like, why Hook hates Peter and about, like, throwing the hand to the crocodile and all that. But on top of that, Hook is also, like, actively trying to find where the boy's hideout is, and he doesn't know it. So, like, unlike in the play where they find it, he doesn't find it until much later. And he thinks that Tiger Lily might know where it is. In the source material, the fact that Tiger Lily gets put on Mariner's Rock really has nothing to do with Peter. But in this version, it's specifically not only within the same day of Peter and the Darlings getting to Neverland, but also is his way of trying to threaten Tiger Lily with the location of the hideout. Again, like, most of the story beats are still there, but the way that this movie plays out, a lot of the elements are interconnected to each other rather than just happening randomly. Oh, also, Hook and Mr. Darling are double cast, and it's great. Originally, Peter and the Darlings just kind of get separated from each other just by accident, but in this one, Hook is actually trying to blast the kids out of the sky with no warning. Is that really good form, James? So when Wendy gets lost, the Lost Boys are again tricked by Tinkerbell into trying to murder her, but this time she doesn't faint. She just kind of has her space invaded by flying debris and then falls downward, but she doesn't pass out. Because again, in this film, all the story beats are there, but they want to keep things going. It looks like the adventures in Neverland time are only about, like, maybe 2 days. We don't have time for Wendy to pass out. They get there, banish Tinkerbell, go straight to the mermaids, go straight to Tiger Lily, blah 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 blah. So once Tink is banished, then we immediately go on to the next adventure. John and Michael team up with the Lost Boys, and Peter and Wendy go to see the mermaids. Just really quick, John in this version is hilarious. Like, he's always sort of tightly wound, but in this one he's almost, like, too academic to function. Everything he says has to be, like, very verbose and drawn out, you know, which then becomes a funny contrast to the way that Michael talks. Oh, I would very much like to cross swords with some real buccaneers. Yeah, and fight pirates, too. Personally, I would prefer to see the Aborigines. Personally, I would prefer for you to shut up! Later, when we watch the 2003 version, that version of John is more, like, obsessed with being, like, an English gentleman. But in this one, he's just a straight-up nerd. Alright, my computer wants to overheat. You just keep doing that, babe. This is your video, not mine, apparently. So, after banishing Tinkerbell for attempted murder, The gang split up. Wendy and Peter go to see the mermaids, and John, Michael, and the Lost Boys go to capture a few Indians. So, around right now, which is time of recording, is it? Oh, it's already April. So around time of recording, Peter Pan hasn't been taken off of Disney Plus. You just can't get it from like a kid's account. So if you have your account set up with like the child safety features or whatever they are, you can't just like hand your kid an iPad and they can find it. Instead, if you want to watch Peter Pan, Dumbo, and like I think a couple of others, you would have to go through an adult's account, and before the thing plays, there's like a black screen with like white text that has a warning that's like, you know, this film contains outdated cultural images or something like that. And yeah, it does. I think that sometimes people are scared to analyze a work of art that hasn't aged very well, because sometimes analyzing that thing can be really stressful. Like if you're bringing your own biases or your own nostalgia to it, or your own fear of doing a racism to it, it can be kind of hard to look at something with a critical eye. Like I know teaching Huckleberry Finn in schools can be kind of a hot button issue, and you know, sometimes people will try and come to its defense by saying like, oh, it was okay at the time, but honestly doing that is kind of avoiding what might be wrong with something. Making excuses for a work or trying to fit it into a modern ethical framework can kind of in their own way be ways of avoiding the way that something is. So just in my personal experience, the best way to analyze a work that has not aged well is to just say that. Like, state it as one of the facts about the work. This film was premiered in 1953. It is animated. It has some outdated depictions of minorities. Don't make excuses for it, just say that it is this way. So Peter Pan isn't canceled, but it's also not immune from criticism. There can be an honest place for critique without just throwing a work away completely. Like, it is important to preserve art, even if it reminds us of an uglier time in our history. Also, I feel like there's been like this kind of hoopla about how am I going to explain to my children? Like, just talk to your kids. Kids are smart. Like, kids know what racism is. You can just explain to your kids that we don't say these kinds of words anymore because they hurt people's feelings. Like, kids aren't stupid. They'll get it. It doesn't have to be a scary thing to admit that we know more now than we did in the past. So, anyways, yes, in this film, the Neverland Natives, as I call them, because as I mentioned in a previous video, the name of the tribe is actually a slur that we can't say anymore. So yeah, in this film, the Neverland Natives aren't called that, but they are still called things that we can't say anymore, like, R-E-D, skins. So when John and the lads are done singing the song Following the Leader, which does also include a word that we can't say anymore, John says, based off of a footprint, that the tribe is Algonquin, which is random and interesting. The kids are captured by the natives, but in this film it's kind of implied that they have like a friendly relationship. Like, in the book and the play, it does seem like they will just genuinely murder each other if they meet in the wrong place in the wrong time, but in this one, slightly mentions that it's a game of turn them loose, where you capture them, but then you let them go. So it's like, it's competitive, but it's not deadly, I guess. But in any case, the fact that they're captured now actually is not on friendly terms, because what happened is that off-screen, Hook did capture Tiger Lily, and the natives don't know where she is, so the chief, who's Tiger Lily's dad, right, thinks that it's the boys' fault, and so he's, like, capturing them to, like, threaten them to tell them where she is, except they don't know where she is. But luckily, we have the next segment to tell us where she is. So while the lads are being threatened by some stereotypes... Oh, I forgot to mention, okay. One more thing before we get to the mermaids is that in this film, since we're talking about, like, negative depictions of minorities, the natives do speak in what I call Tarzan English. If you've ever seen depictions of Native Americans like this, then you'll know what I mean, where it's like, it's a very stilted, kind of insultingly childish way to speak. You know, me Tarzan, you Jane, big tree, pale face, mountain. You know, it's very rude. I mean, I guess that's kind of an understatement, but you know what I mean. So the mermaids in this film are very friendly to Peter. Again, each adaptation is just going to decide whether or not the mermaids are going to be nice or evil or just even there at all. In this one, the mermaids are kind of simping for Peter, and so is Tiger Lily, and so is Wendy. I feel like in all earlier adaptations, just every woman is in love with Peter to some capacity, or I guess every girl, because they're kids. A girl? What's she doing here? And in her nightdress, too. In this one, they're very majestic and beautiful, and the music that's playing along with them is, like, very airy. It's like flutes and stuff, like, oh, look at the beautiful mermaids. They're doing their hair and lounging around because they don't have to pay taxes. So like I said, this film is really trying to keep everything going, so this scene is tied to the exact next scene, which is Marooner's Rock, and all of these things are connected. Did you catch your monster? Did you monster your hunts?
I defeated all three. What?
I just like looking at you.
Why?
Because you're pretty.
What sick game is this?
Getting affection for no reason? What kind of sick game is this? So from their place in the lagoon after talking to the mermaids and apparently being almost drowned by them, Peter and Wendy see Hook and Smee taking Tiger Lily to Marooner's Rock. In the source material, it seemed like Marooner's Rock really was just like a rock sticking out of the ocean that would be covered up by the water at high tide. But here they have it in like a spooky cave that looks like a skull, so it's like, that's fun. That's like a fun new environment to be in. And in the spooky cave, Hook actually mentions something from the book, which is that the natives on the island believe that there is no path through water to the happy hunting ground. So if you die in the ocean, you can't go to heaven, I guess. This is your last chance, Tiger Lily. Minotaur, great spirit of mighty sea waters, speaks. Beware, Hook. Beware. The entire segment in Skull Rock is just a testament to how much of a brat that Peter is. First of all, instead of imitating Hook directly to his face, he instead hides so that he and Hook are giving Smee conflicting directions on what to do with Tiger Lily. And once it's actually revealed that it is Peter messing with them, they go into this like great sword fight, which again just has like so many moments of brattiness from Peter. Like really he's just showing off, just like randomly like poking his opponent and like trying to mess with him by walking him off the rock. Like, Peter is just such a brat. I love it. All of this is then interrupted by the crocodile and what I can only describe as some shots of very shameless vor. I told you, Peter Pan belongs to the furries. Peter, having the attention span of a tumbleweed, forgets about Tiger Lily, has to save her, and then once he has Tiger Lily, forgets about Wendy. This boy is a mess. So we're back with Hook, and I just need to take a moment to just gush about the score of this movie. Like, not a second of this score is wasted. Like, almost every second of the movie has some kind of music going, and it all just fits so perfectly. Like, at the very beginning, when Mr. Darling is kind of, like, falling around, like, the music is going along with his body swaying and along with Nana's little feet scuttling. Back when the mermaids were messing with Wendy, the music used for the mermaid suddenly like gets more tense as like they start messing with her, and some of the music kind of goes up and down along with Peter's laughter, and then kind of like goes down when Wendy's like with her body language, like she's getting very frumpy. And in this next segment where Hook is recovering on his ship and the crocodile's outside, there's this very like mellowed out version of the crocodile's theme. And like in this movie, we know that the crocodile's coming not necessarily because of her ticking clock, but because we hear her theme. Like, I don't know a lot about music, so I'm probably not explaining this very well, but the music in this movie is just like so like intertwined with every single second of it. Like, I have this movie memorized, and that includes the score. Like, you can't separate any part of this movie from the music. It's just really beautiful. So in this next scene, we have like a big departure from the source material. In that Tinkerbell's banishment is apparently like the hot goss of the island. In Smee's words, it was, "I wouldn't want this to go any farther, but the cook told me that the first mate told him that he heard that Pan has banished Tinkerbell." So it's like, I just love that. I love that there's a rumor mill in this tiny island with like 100 people in it at most. So not only that, but out of this information, Hook devises a scheme to get Tinkerbell to tell him the location of the hideout. He says, like, a jealous female can be tricked into anything, which just went way over my head as a kid. I'm a captain. This hat has my name on it. So while Smee is going to get Tinkerbell, the Lost Boys are partying it up with the natives, and we get to hear the famous song, "What Made the Red Man Red." I feel like you could write an entire video just about this song and all of the things that went wrong with it, but much smarter people have gone into detail about it. I'll probably put some links below. I won't linger on it too long. All I will say is just, yikes. Before I move on, though, I will point out that Disney does license out versions of their movies for like school plays and stuff, and it's always like the title Junior. So there's like a Frozen Junior, there's a Moana Junior, an Aladdin Junior, and naturally there's a Peter Pan Junior. So in like the Junior productions, all of the music and songs are the same, but in the Peter Pan one, What Made the Red Man Red has been rewritten to What Makes the Brave Man Brave, and the lyrics are like, "We're called braves because we don't back down and we love our friends," or whatever. And I don't know, that might just be like a "you tried," but I'll put that link in the description as well, and you can decide whether or not it slaps. So after all of that, Smee takes Tinkerbell to talk to Hook. In this version, as well as the 1991 and the 2003 version of Peter Pan, we see Hook being like more of a manipulator. Like, in the source material, obviously, he's like a cutthroat, and he loves murdering people. But as the adaptations have been made over the years, and people want to spend more time with Hook and seeing, like, what kind of person he is, the way that he's, like, a wicked person is sort of explored in various ways. So, like, in the 1991 movie, Hook, Hook is just, like, he's just very scary. He just kind of steamrolls over everyone. He, like, rules with an iron hook, I guess. And whenever he's talking to Tinkerbell, he probably doesn't see her as an equal, because he's evil, but he does kind of have, like, a battle of wits with her. He's, like, having a back and forth, like, trying to get his way. So that's kind of an interesting take on him. And then in 2003, the live-action Peter Pan, Hook is more of a manipulator with his words, but in that version, the person he's manipulating is Wendy. He's trying to, like, build her up and make her feel like, oh, if you become a pirate, then you'll be, like, respected and cool. In this version, he's more of a manipulator with his words, in that he does that thing where he kind of, like, puts a thought in your head. And, to me, as an adult, obviously, it's very clear what he's doing. But Tink is at a disadvantage because she's emotionally compromised, because her BFF is ignoring her because he has a crush, So Hook invites Tinkerbell to his quarters and, like, plays the mandolin. Oh, yeah, and he also has his double pronged cigar thingy in this one. But anyways, so he's talking to her and saying like, oh, I'm done with Peter. I'm leaving the island. Oh, and I heard about Wendy. And he's just like going on in like this thing and like really messing with Tinkerbell and being like, oh, I bet I could kidnap Wendy and take her away from Neverland. If only I knew where the hideout was, you know. So Tinkerbell does expose the location of the hideout, which is a place called Hangman's Tree, which is just a tree with a bunch of nooses on it. And that's kind of interesting, you know. It's like Skull Rock, where it's just like kind of a morbid thing instead of just being like, oh, that thing, it's just over there. So anyways, over there, where the hideout is, the boys get home from partying with the natives. And then things kind of start going down again, like in the source material where Wendy starts saying like, oh, we need to go home, we need to go see our parents, and Michael has completely forgotten who their parents are. Wendy starts talking about mothers, and then they all decide that they want to go home. In this version, the natives are kind of done with the story. Yeah, we don't see them again. So there is no like battle up above the hideout or anything. It's just like the pirates come and then they listen to Wendy singing her song. Your mother and mine, your mother. And then they kidnap everybody, so there's no like great battle. Peter tells them all to leave, but like he's kind of convinced that they're going to come back. And in this version, instead of poison, Hook tries to kill Peter with a bomb. So before the bomb goes off the next morning, we get a song about how much fun it'll be to join a pirate ship. At some point, Hook says that for those who sign without delay, we'll get a free tattoo, which implies that he charges his own crew to get a tattoo on his own ship. Apparently being a pirate involves microtransactions. Who knew? You know, being a pirate sounds fun, but eventually Wendy snaps them out of it, and they're like, no, Peter Pan will save us, and Hook is like, no. And he reveals his plan. The bomb, like the poison, is also meant to seem like it's from Wendy. Like, it has a little note that says, to Peter, with love from Wendy, do not open till 6 o'clock. Bold of this adaptation to assume that Peter can read, but Tinkerbell gets there just in time and pushes it out of the way, and there's like this very, like, sweet, dramatic scene of him, like, pushing through the wreckage, trying to look for her, and her light's going out, and it's like very sweet. So then Wendy walks the plank, but oh, there's no splash. Because Peter came to save her, obviously. So the final battle goes off. I really love, not only just like the fact that it's a battle, because I love fight choreography, but also because we get a lot of characterization about the way that the Lost Boys interact with John and Michael. Like, they have nicknamed them Wildcat and Bear Killer. So that's just really cute that we get like little bits of like how the boys have bonded with John and Michael. There is a brief moment where Hook thinks that he can use his manipulation again, where he's like, oh, of course you're flying away, Peter, because you're a coward, and he kind of baits Peter into not flying because he thinks that that's going to win him the sword fight, and it doesn't. He still loses. Like, Hook, can you even call yourself a pirate? You're constantly being foiled by like a 5-year-old. I mean, in this version, he kind of looks like he might be, like, a tween, but still. One of your hands is a weapon. You have an advantage, and you still lost. Get wrecked, idiot. So Peter and the boys win, and this next scene is actually very sweet, because they're, like, you know, setting sail. Peter's like, I'm the captain now, and Wendy's like, where are we going? And Peter says that they're setting sail for London, which is, like, actually really sweet. Like, he knows that she wants to go home, and he just takes her home, even though he doesn't want her to go. Like, I never really thought about how, like, surprisingly selfless that was when I was a kid, but now, especially after having read and watched so many adaptations where, yes, Peter absolutely is a brat, to see him do something, even something, like, kind of small, is just very sweet. I really like this Peter. He's got that, you know, rascal with a heart of gold sort of characteristic about him. It's great. In this adaptation, the Lost Boys don't come home with the Darlings, like they don't get adopted or anything. In fact, there's actually no proof that this adventure ever happened. Like, it took, you know, again, like maybe 1 or 2 days in Neverland time, but on Earth time, it was only a couple of hours. So they're home by the time Mr. and Mrs. Darling get home from their party. Like, they aren't even dirty after their adventure. They didn't bring home any weapons. You know, like in the 2003, Wendy just brings home a sword and just has that with her because that's safe. In this one, I actually kind of like that. You know, it's got that whimsy, you know, like a Dragon Tales situation where it's like, oh, we had this amazing adventure that the grown-ups just won't understand. Except, at the very end, Wendy's looking out the window, and Mr. and Mrs. Darling look out there too. And we see something that maybe is a cloud, but maybe is a ship. And all of a sudden, Mr. Darling's voice gets very soft, and he goes, you know, I have the strangest feeling that I've seen that ship before, a long time ago, when I was very young. So overall, this movie is wonderful and whimsical, but obviously I'm very biased. So this movie, like, really is a part of me, you know? I feel like I don't really have to explain it. I feel like everyone has, like, that one movie or one book or one comic book or song or whatever that's just, like, it's just a part of you, you know? And it's lucky that I know this film so well, because earlier I mentioned that a lot of adaptations will decide whether or not they want to be an adaptation of the play or the book. But in the case of some of the things we're going to be looking at, the adaptations are going to be an adaptation of this adaptation, which is true for our next subject, which is Peter Pan's flight.